Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with author and activist Naomi Wolf. Now, before the break, we had a question from Juliana in Paris who was saying about Africa and how the new administration might regard Africa. Perhaps we could broaden it to look at how you think foreign policy might change, because that's always been low on the priority list for a lot of people in this country.
That's true, and unfortunately, our leadership reflects the extraordinary lack of concern Americans tend to have toward their relationship to the rest of the world, or even events in the rest of the world, much to our detriment. I'm part of the revolution I'm urging compels us to change that. It cannot continue that we live in this bubble in which we don't take any responsibility for international treaties, in which we break international laws. We don't partner with other nations and continents to limit global warming. We have to become citizens of the world. I do obviously believe an Obama presidency will go much, much further than the team we've seen in power in partnering intelligently with the rest of the world. I think a model, seeing what's possible is the Clinton years. Whatever you may think of Bill Clinton, I thought they had a really smart, engaged overseas policy, and they understood pretty deeply. They had people on board who understood deeply development challenges and democracy challenges in Africa and throughout the developing world. Mrs. Clinton was very, very good on women's issues in the developing world, I felt.
Were you disappointed she wasn't on the ticket, like perhaps as a vice presidential candidate? Would that have been a better bet for you, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton?
Well, in retrospect, it's like a match set. But at the time, since no one foresaw Sarah Palin, no, I don't think she would have been an ideal pick for number 2 this time around. That said, she's the only woman in America who can effectively take on Sarah Palin, and I wish that she saw that as being her role right now. I'm not persuaded that she does.
We had in your book, Give Me Liberty, you have a wish list for the future, various things that you'd like to see, and included, for example, referenda for various key issues. So how do you see that working? Another thing, for example, is getting Americans to understand processes and ideals, American processes and ideals. What would it take? What does a person have to go out and do to get in touch with these, so to speak, to understand these better?
What do you have to do? Well, I tried to make it all accessible in one handy package, because the horrible truth is that when you're American, it's very difficult to get the basic information you need to understand democracy or to understand how to engage with it effectively. It's shocking. I mean, this is part of the propaganda. There's a section in the book where I try to exert my rights, as Jefferson asked me to do. I try to help a friend run for Senate in Virginia. I try to, start a political campaign. I try to, rally citizens in Union Square. And again, I run up against these roadblocks. So one of the things I offer, and it's not just for Americans, it's, I think, of interest universally, we translated the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, into ordinary people's English, because those are very dense documents in 18th century prose, and you got to know what they say. So there's a user's guide to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, but there are other very basic guides to becoming citizen leaders. For instance, we've been trained to leave debate to the pundits, to the CNN and Fox News. This is not what the founders wanted. Ordinary people are supposed to be leading the debate. So I teach people how to write an op-ed, for instance, how to leak to reporters if there are abuses, how to, well, take yourself more seriously than that as a citizen. Blogs aren't enough, opinion isn't enough. You have to create samizdat, you have to become a citizen journalist to replace the mainstream media, in effect. I teach people how to organize, as I mentioned, fellow citizens into registered voters to become power blocks during campaign cycles. But most fundamentally, we really need to shift our consciousness that, I say again and again that the most important thing the founders left us, and this is something that all over the world, all over the developing world, people have wanted and used for their own vision and advancement. The founders wanted us to internalize, above all, a psychology of liberty. And we've lost that in America, and we need to take it back into our hearts.
Let's get Zach on the line from Arizona. Zach, thanks for your patience. Go ahead, please.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you very much. It's my pleasure. I tell you, it's just great. I'm a U.S. soldier, and I first of all would like to applaud the lady for her efforts, and I agree with her 110%. I think most Americans do not have an idea what freedom is all about. I think they've taken it for granted, and it's about time for us to revive that. With that being said, I also agree with the lady when she says about what she said about the John McCain and Palin. I agree with her as well. However, upon my return from my deployment to Afghanistan, I've noticed a small change among my soldiers, that they have sort of seen the big picture, and they have an idea of what exactly is going on in the real world. With that being said, I was wondering what does the lady think about that? I mean, do you think there's a hope after all? And the second part of that question is that what do you think about Obama?
Okay.
Oh wow! Can I ask Zach? And I'm Naomi, just so you know, I don't have to be the lady. First, thank you for your service, and I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Every time so many soldiers and senior military people have come up to me across the political spectrum, because these are transpartisan issues, and said something like this, and it just breaks my heart that these young men and women are being sacrificed on the basis of lies. What do you mean that they've seen the larger world, Zach?
I've noticed a trend in my most younger soldiers that they're seeing a bigger picture, sort of. They're seeing the corporate America at work.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
seeing
I think that's right. I think that's right.
And I think it's in a case of exposure too, isn't it? Because certainly living in America now, 15 years or so, nearly 16 years, it's true there's a lack of knowledge about the world, there's lack of understanding or lack of access to international news and information largely.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that simply the act of being shipped overseas and being around people who see America from a completely different perspective is eye-opening to many soldiers. And I've heard some of them say so. What disturbs me a lot is that when soldiers have started to speak out about that or about other critical issues around the war, they've experienced very serious consequences. So I have to honor Zach's courage. What about Obama? We're sort of circling back to that same question. I don't believe that he would squander young Americans' lives on the basis of falsehoods, which is what has happened with the invasion of Iraq.
Now we don't have a lot of time, so I want to just touch on something that I noticed you had an interesting response, a huge response to your blogs on the hijab, the Muslim headscarf that women wear, and it's interesting you see it. The covering up in some way as an empowerment as well. And
let me correct you, Riz. I just want to be super clear.
Please.
It's been misframed that I endorse it or I see it as empowering. That's not what I meant to say. What I wrote in my essay very considerately is that many Muslim feminists I've heard from see Western negative views of body or head coverings as very reductive, and some of them feel that some of them see the hijab in feminist terms.
Now, taking that argument just into how what's happened in the past 8 years, certainly, as a lot of people see it, as divisions between America and the West and the Muslim world. How do you regard, this kind of division and what harm it might do to what has always been a very inclusive society in America?
I mean, this is, we should devote, many, many hours to this. Is the most burning issue of the day. Well, this and the suppression of liberties. I was very lucky in college to have taken a course on the Quran, and it's really only for that reason that I was able to withstand this assault of propaganda and distortion about what this religion is. I was also fortunate to have traveled in many Muslim countries, Morocco and Lebanon and Jordan, and experienced, and I'm Jewish, and experienced the incredible, reaching out of that is possible between citizens and between our communities. So what I think is that what's happened since 9/11 is the worst kind of the historically darkest kind of demagoguery. It has really nothing to do with Islam. It almost has nothing to do with the terrorist attacks. That's a pretext. But this administration has used sort of hate-mongering 101 to the way, all the great dictators, hype a threat or distort the enemy. I'm Jewish. Am I familiar with the idea of saying these evil people want to poison our wells, they want to sacrifice our young, they want to, toxify, they hate our freedoms. I mean, they hate our freedoms. Hitler used that language. So I think it's very evil. I think it's very sacrilegious. And I think we have a lot to answer for. I hope that the next administration will support the kind of cross-cultural dialogue and communication and experience of one another that we desperately need, because I know from personal experience that there is so much more that we share than that divides us.
Well, Naomi Wolf, always so many questions, never enough time. Thank you so much for being with us. It was a real pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you for being with us too. On the next show, we look at dissent in the Democratic ranks with the former US presidential candidate, Mike Gravel. We'll see you next time. From me and the team, goodbye.